Every Monday, offices fill up and people work really hard throughout the week. Some people do overtime and some people even work on the weekends. There's 1-hour commutes into work, or people live in the city closer to work but pay extortionate rent. Then on Friday, finally everyone's released from their jobs, pubs start to overfill and drinks start to overflow as people can finally let off some steam. This is before it all begins again on a Monday. So I'm still really young, I'm still in my 20s, and I'm only a few years out of university. I'm not yet married and I don't have any kids. So there's this expectation that this is the time where I should be working the hardest. And when I say working the hardest, I mean putting the most hours in. In theory, I could be earning about £60,000 a year right now, or if I really put the time and effort in, I could be earning £100,000 a year. But instead, I made the choice to work part-time. In this video, I just want to challenge society's normal expectations by talking about why I chose to go part-time and what it's given me. Work is not my purpose in life. So like many other people, I've often wondered what my purpose in life was, and I thought the answer would come from my career. So I've always put so much time and so much energy into studying and working, hoping that I would find the answer. And when I finally did graduate and qualify as a dentist and I started working, I realised that my purpose in life was not to be a dentist. And this has nothing to do with whether I enjoy dentistry or not. It's that I knew almost instinctively that my entire existence couldn't be defined by the fact that I could fix other people's teeth. Because even though my job is meaningful in the fact that it does help other people, it sounds absolutely ridiculous when you think of trying to define your entire life just based on being able to do that. Even if someone has the most high-flying job in the world, it doesn't tell me anything about that person except for what they do for a living. So I guess one of the reasons that I'm part-time is that it really does reaffirm this message to me. It's so much easier to say that I'm more than my job when I do so much more than my job. I work to live, I don't live to work. A lot of our time is spent working, and it's not even just the 40-hour work weeks. We also have to wake up really early, get dressed for work. Sometimes we have really long commutes, and our lunch breaks still tend to be in the office because we don't have much time to go out. So when we consider the time that we spend towards work and the time that we need to sleep, there's very little time outside of that. It means that we really have to squeeze things in around our work schedules. And this is really a trade-off between time and money, and this is where we will all differ. There will definitely be some people who are way more motivated by money than I am, but I just think in general that a lot of us would be so much happier if we did have more time, and I think our quality of life would definitely improve. So for me personally, I value time so much more than I value money. With time, none of us have any control or any power over time. We're all limited on our time and we can never access more of it once it's up. Especially as someone who is in my 20s, I've actually been expected to work 6 days a week to earn as much as possible before I have a house and before I have kids. But why should I trade in my youth for a future which hasn't even arrived yet? I don't want to be a slave to my work, so I now fit in work around my life rather than trying to schedule life around my work. So for example, I live up north in Manchester, but my family live in London, and usually I would be really limited on the time that I could see them if I was working full-time. But the fact that I can work part-time means that I can go see them for 4 days at a time and just enjoy my time with them without feeling like it was just a rushed visit. I can also squeeze in mini holidays throughout the year without having to rely on using my annual leave. I can do errands and go to the doctors and do whatever else I like to do during the week without having to worry about taking time off. I also get to slow down life and have slower days, which make me feel like I'm truly living and appreciating life so much more. I have a lot less money than other dentists do, but I have a lot more time than them, and I use that time to develop myself and my skills, which just makes me really happy. And by doing that, I also just feel like my lifetime possibilities are just so much more endless than if I was just to commit to one thing 5 days a week. Because as I develop my skills outside of my job, I will never know where that could take me later in life. I avoid burnout and stress. So I think with any job, it's really hard to do 40 hours a week and not eventually burn out. I think as human beings, we aren't programmed to be that focused for so long and be completely productive. So as a dentist, I have no choice but to be productive all the time, and I think it's a lot easier because I am dealing with people. But on the flip side, I do think because I'm with people all day, especially as an introvert, it can be very, very draining. I'm sometimes seeing 30 plus patients a day, and maintaining conversation throughout the day is really exhausting, plus doing really highly skilled work can be very, very tough. And so by the end of the day, I often feel really, really exhausted, both mentally and also physically. And that's fine when I'm doing it 2 or 3 days a week, but I think if I was to do 5 days a week, I would really struggle with this. And I think in no time I would probably get burnout. When we consider Nordic countries, they're often considered the happiest countries in the world, and they don't tend to work as many hours as we do here in the UK and in the US. Most people tend to leave work at 4 p.m, and if you stay for any longer, you're not seen any differently. I really feel like there's this massive risk in society these days to be put on a hamster wheel. We go to university, we get student debts, we work really hard, we've then got a mortgage, we have to work even harder, and we end up putting more and more hours into our jobs. And in the end, it's really a cost to our mental and physical health, which to me is just not worth it at all. I know so many dentists who have chronic back pain, and I often get told that dentists have amongst the highest suicide rate. But I don't even think it's just reserved for my profession. I think it can happen in any field if you're putting in so many long hours into your job. So going part-time not only avoids these effects of burnout and stress and everything that comes with it, it also makes you more fulfilled and more appreciative of the work that you end up doing. I don't want all of my eggs in one basket. So I think my mindset with work really changed when I was unemployed for 8 months because of COVID. It made me realise how dangerous it is to have one full-time job, because if you lose that, your whole lifestyle is basically dependent on it. When I tell people that I work part-time, I sometimes get the feeling that they look down on me. I think that they either think I'm really lazy or that I have a poor work ethic. Now, I don't see my worth as a human being as my work ethic at all. I don't think the two are correlated in any way. But my point is that people just see one side of it, and they don't realise that I just like to work on various different things which they might not understand. A lot of people say that they want money because money gives freedom, but money only gives you freedom if you learn how to make money work for you. If you're trading in your time and your life in for money, then money's not giving you freedom, it's actually enslaving you. You become a slave to your job and to money. Understanding this is what pushed me to look into investing my money and to see how I can make my money help me go further. And I think that if I worked 5 days and had all this excess money, I probably wouldn't care as much about investing. So by being part-time, I feel like it's really forced me to be creative, not only with my time, so I'm looking for other ways to make money, but also being more creative with the money that I do have to help me go further. I spend significantly less. When I was working full-time, I was also spending a ridiculous amount of money on various things. Because I had so much excess money compared to what I actually needed, it meant that I wasn't that intentional with my money. When I was living in London, I was spending a ridiculous amount of money on clothes every month, drinks, food, and just going out. Nowadays, I go out way less and I enjoy home cooking a lot more. I never spend money on things like coffees or teas out because I'd rather have a cup of tea at home. I barely ever spend money on things like clothes or makeup or skincare items these days, and I very rarely spent any money on transport. There was one point where I was working in a private practice in London, which took me an hour and a half to commute into, and I spent so much money travelling in. I also moved away from London and I now live up north where things are cheaper as well. I don't even think it's about spending less money, I think it's more about being more intentional with how you do spend, because when you are part-time, you know you're earning less, so you become more aware of what you're spending. You no longer buy random things just to make life more bearable, you actually think about what you really value and what you really need in life. And this has just had a positive effect on me in general, where I don't feel like I'm wasting as much as well. And because I'm spending less, it's not had as big of an impact on savings as I thought it would. I think society can be really expensive and we're sold this image of what our life should look like. But when you really reevaluate what you want and what you need, you realize that you might not need as much as you think you do to live. And that's definitely been the case for me as I switched to being part-time. So I just wanted to talk about a few things that have enabled me to be part-time. It's so much easier to be part-time if you have a career which is flexible and well-paying. And actually the fact that dentistry is so flexible is one of the reasons why I wanted to be a dentist. I've always known that I would be part-time after having kids. I just didn't think that I would end up being part-time so much earlier. It's also a lot easier being part-time when you don't live in London and you don't live in a city, because everything's a little bit cheaper. And also it's a lot easier to be part-time when you have a simpler lifestyle, which I I think I do. Now, there is a lot of privilege that comes with the ability to be part-time like I am. The first is that I had access to a really good education and to especially a higher education. I'm also extremely privileged to be born in the UK and to be paid the way that I am paid as a dentist. I'm also really privileged because I don't have massive student debt. So when I started university, the student fees were a lot lower for me, and that's a really massive privilege because it means that you don't feel like you're having something hanging over your head. I also lived at home for most of the time that I was at university, and I also lived at home for about 3 years after I left university. And this also helped massively because it meant that I was able to save a lot of money during this time. I'm so grateful to have such supportive parents who allowed me to do this because it's really given me a leg up as I started to work. And the last thing that I want to say is obviously right now I'm not married and I don't have kids, which means it's just me, and that makes it a lot easier to be part-time as well when you're not responsible for other people. So this video is not to tell you that you should quit your job and find a part-time job or to live a life like I do, but I guess the idea of this video is just to challenge society's normal expectations of us. I know some people who have really learned to make work for them. So I know some people who have negotiated with their bosses to work 3 longer days so that they get 4 days off in the week. I just feel like we all need to take a step back and see what we actually need from life and what we need from our working lives. I feel like we need to separate our feelings of self-worth from how many hours we're putting in at the office. Working full-time is not an obligation, it's a choice. And maybe it's a choice that you have to make, or maybe it's a choice that you want to make, but just make sure that that choice is in your hands and not in society's hands. So stay intentional and go create some magic.